introduce Melody to the stage. Melody has produced and worked with a wide variety of mediums, from VR to TVCs to web series, animation, and even projections on the Opera House for Vivid. Her background in 3D animation and post-production, coupled with her experience as an actor and writer, have given her the skills needed to weave creative and engaging stories with a technical and logistic eye. Currently, she works as a producer at The Pulse, and I'll let her finish introducing herself to you. Hi, everyone. As she mentioned, oh yes, and hello, this is Julia. Hello. She will be participating as part of the upfront thing. Sorry, I'm struggling really hard with putting this thing in my pocket. Awkward. Okay, hello. So just to quickly explain what Upfront is, it's this really amazing initiative, as you mentioned, by Lauren Curry, that really tackles the lack of diversity on stage by inviting speakers like myself to share this space. It helps others, including myself, struggle with stage fright. You probably can't tell, you probably can. I have crippling social anxiety. Luckily, I had some alcohol, so you can't tell I'm actually blushing for real. It's my secret. And what it does is it helps you feel empowered to be able to be part of this space and hopefully feel like you can actually stand here in front of all these staring faces to do it themselves. So before I kick off, can you please join me in giving her a lovely warm welcome? All right, so here we go. So just to give you a bit of a backstory about me, you've already got a pretty comprehensive one as it is, but I'm a producer at Experience the Pulse. Experience the Pulse is this company that specialises in non-traditional content. So we've done the projections on the Opera House, we do experiential content at car shows, and mainly we do virtual reality stuff. So training and education in VR, and most importantly to me, storytelling and original content. So out of curiosity, how many people here have actually done VR before? Created and experienced it. Okay, cool. So for the benefit of what looks like half of the audience, I might just quickly explain the two different types of VR that are out there at the moment. There is mobile VR, which is probably the most common experienced one, which is where you've got a phone and a headset, you're locked to position and you can kind of move your head around and up and down, but you're stuck and it's kind of like a vomitron. You do it and you want to vomit. It still has benefits, but it's not quite as advanced as the other one, which is tethered to a PC. That one is your Oculus, your Vive, your PSVR. It's a lot more fun because you can actually move around in the space, you can pick things up. It's a lot more immersive. What was really interesting about making VR is I didn't start off as a VR producer. I started in film. I started as an actor, and making this leap over to VR has made me, I think, give me a really rudimentary understanding of interaction design. This whole talk is a result of my really steep learning curve, trying to figure out what the hell it is. So if some of this is repeating things you already know, again, I'm really sorry in advance, but hopefully you can join me on this journey. Okay. So what I want to do tonight is give you guys some questions that I want you to take with you and ask yourself if you ever decide to make VR content on your own. So out of curiosity, for those people that have experienced VR content before, what stuck with you the most? Was it the prettiest thing, or was it the thing that had the most meaning? If anyone wants to speak as well.
Interaction.
The interaction? What about the interaction was interesting to you?
Just in much as the space I was in, you know, in a 360 manner, and you could also actually, it was in a car park actually.
Okay.
So, basically, a car park, and you could move around the whole space.
Uh-huh.
And wherever you were, you could just move around this room now, and go up to characters within the space. Another thing I saw, which was a VR conference, Convergence, actually a customer, I think it was the agent, they literally had this VR set up where you could go through a bit home, and you could take, your partner with you, and you could both wear headsets, and you could go, hey, come over here, look at this space.
Could you see each other in it?
You could see each other in it, yeah.
That's really cool.
As avatars.
Yeah,
Not
of course,
as
yes.
each other.
Not yet.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yes.
I would say quality of vision and sound as well. The sound design was really important in terms of the immersion.
Awesome. I'm going to come back to those things, and that's really important that... Oh, you going to say something?
Yes.
Yes, go.
I recall I was at the Antenna Film Festival, and it was a documentary-esque immersive experience, and it was so engaging that I felt as though I was feeling and smelling the water and the tropical plants. So the sensorial aspects of VR and how potentially it could be really beneficial in medical and particularly in, re-engaging with the different parts of humanity.
Cool. That's really interesting. That was just purely for my own curiosity. So sorry, I took up a bit of your time. So quickly, I know that the title of my talk is specifically storytelling, but in hindsight, that's kind of the wrong word, because a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is about empathy. But as you see, storytelling is nothing without empathy and connection, right? One can't really exist without the other. It's like I could tell you about how I fell at the train station the other day. Whatever. Or I could tell you about how I stacked it and I fell between the train and the platform and I cracked 2 ribs, and yeah, it's legit. I can show you the scar if you want. It was like really traumatizing. I didn't realize that I had actually like cracked 2 ribs and like needed to get 5 stitches, but what's really hilarious is you're kind of listening to me now, right? You didn't care that I fell at the train station, but now I'm that idiot that fell between the train gap. And that's the thing, without some kind of connection, whether it's empathy, I'm hoping some of you empathize with me instead of just judging me silently. That laugh tells me you were mostly judging me silently. Without an emotional investment, whether it's waiting for the punchline or empathizing with someone, you don't really care. So in VR, empathizing with your audience and their experience is so fundamental to making something that's good, especially because making VR and being in VR feels almost like you're completely relearning English from the start. It's familiar, but it also doesn't really make sense because it's kind of really different, if that makes sense. Like it's really confronting because you're strapping this screen to your face and you kind of forget how to human because it's not really what you think the real world is. And I think that's really interesting, and you have to really keep that in mind when you're designing stuff for that space. You know, when you're creating empathy in traditional film, we tell stories through careful scripting and performance. We've got techniques like music and specifically framing the shot, but storytelling in VR is same but different. You've got this whole other dimension that you have to deal with, right? You still can manipulate the music, you can manipulate the sound and the color, but the person is literally in the space with you. And you're actually able to really add this whole other dimension to what you're seeing. And it's really isolating because you're by yourself. You're really lucky because you managed to experience something where you could see someone else in an avatar, but most of the time, it's just this one solo experience. And again, if it's your first ever time, like it's kind of confronting because you can't reach out to someone next to you and laugh about it. You can't ask for help because you don't really know what to do. You're literally in there by yourself, and you really need empathy when you're trying to design an experience in that case. So a few things that you need to think about when you're making 360 content is you have to consider it in a different way to a traditional 16:9 straight format. In mobile content, your camera is kind of locked, and it's this really strange feeling where you're either forced to feel like you're in the first-person perspective, where this whole story is unfolding because of you, or if it's told from a third-person perspective, you automatically feel like a voyeur because you can actually choose what you're having a look at. And it's this really strange, like, I don't know what I am, like, what is my role here? And that's exactly what it is. In VR, you search for context clues to figure out who you are and why you're in this space. And when you're designing an experience for this, you need to take this into account. Otherwise, you're going to have people that are completely lost and don't know what's going on, and it's going to make your experience not enjoyable. And again, you're not going to have a reaction or a feeling out of it. And that should be the most important thing. So in experiences where it's like a mobile-based in experiences where it's in a mobile headset where it's only locked position, sometimes the best way to deal with that is actually to lean into it. So for example, a film that we recently made called 30 Minutes of Danger, what we did was we made that restriction of not being able to move part of the experience. So you're actually poisoned. And as you get more and more poisoned as the film goes on, you have basically no control over your body, but we were able to bring points of immersion into it by adapting real-time technology. So what we did was, there's a point in the film when you get slapped. It's really fun, I know. You get slapped in the face, and we changed the film so that you physically have to react to it to continue to watch the story. Or as you get more and more poisoned, you start seeing your vision start to cloud over and encroach, and we design it so that if you shook your head, you cleared your vision. And these are all things that tie back to actions that we understand as a person. You know, when you see a cartoon of someone getting knocked over and they see a Tweety bird flying over their head, what do? They shake their head when they want to clear their vision. So that's the thing. You also have to try to connect these actions and these interactions to real-world examples. Another thing, sorry, tell me if I'm boring you guys. Another thing is, in room scale, you would feel less like a voyeur because you can actually walk around in the space and physically look for these context clues. And you need to account for this as well when you're designing, because just the way that people approach, let me backtrack. When you're presented with a film, you kind of already know how to deal with it. You know that you're going to watch it and certain things are going to make you feel things. But a lot of people who are trying VR either for the first or second time, probably for the first 5 to 10 minutes, they're just kind of freaking out about how great it is. How it's like so immersive. Look, I can see a tree that's purple. Oh my God, you know, like that's more what they care about as opposed to the story or what you're trying to build to them. And that's just something that you really need to consider as well, because it's just really disorienting. It's kind of like a lucid dream. But the really cool thing about making VR is you can literally put yourself in someone else's shoes when you're building it. So, you know, when you're making film, you kind of have to try to put your mindset into, like, what if I was Shelia from down the road and I was 38 years old with 2 kids? I have no idea what that's like, but I have to pretend for a hot second that I am, so I can understand whether or not she sees this film as something that's legitimately good to her. But to a certain degree, you're still not going to be able to pretend to be Shelia down the street with 3 kids or 2 kids, but you're still able to experience, by putting this headset on when you build it, whether or not it makes sense to you, if that makes sense. So, what makes you care about something that's happening in front of you? Like, if you watched a clip of a complete stranger that you had no context about, that you had never heard about, start talking about something really intimate and deep, like their sexual assault. Sorry, it's getting a bit deep here. How would that make you feel? Like, uncomfortable? But would it really affect you? Like, would you actually genuinely respond to that on an emotional level? And then what if someone stood right here in front of you, like where I am, and I was telling you about the time that I was harassed at the bus stop? Now, how does that make you feel? I wasn't harassed at a bus stop, it's okay, I'm an actor. But how did that make you feel for a second, right? I was right in front of you, and maybe I should have made you a bit more uncomfortable, but I feel like that would have made you feel something a lot more than this person that you've never met telling you about something that may or may not have happened to her. And that's what's really amazing about VR, is that you can make yourself feel like you're physically in front of someone. You can feel like you're literally sitting in front of someone and experience them talking to you and connecting with you directly. And that's so amazing. When you're creating a product or a piece that needs to really touch the audience, specifically in VR, you need to consider these things. How does your real world affect you on an emotional and human level? And how can you translate that into your experience? Because, you know, when you're designing for like a web or for the screen, you used to have to find a parallel to that, but now you can literally translate it completely, almost completely. So VR has been referred to as an empathy machine, and there's this video that I'm going to play for you guys called The Machine to Be Another, and it's a really simple concept. You've got these 2 people wearing a headset, you've got a camera strapped to the headset, and they're moving in sync.
the other? Would you be an immigrant? Would you change your gender? Would you dare to see yourself with physical disabilities? We've decided to hack neuroscience experiments to experience what it's like to be in the body of a different person. For almost 2 years, we've been investigating how do people interact with the existence of someone else, what experiences can be shared, and how to generate empathy among individuals that are different in a social, cultural, or ideological way.
Para mí bailar es toda la vida. Y yo cuando yo bailo por la gente que ve, porque los movimientos que yo bailo es para ellos.
The Machine to Be Another combines neuroscience protocols with art performances to trick the brain's perception of one's own body. Instead of seeing themselves in the body of a digital avatar, like in most of the neuroscience studies, the machine allows users to see themselves in the body of a real person. The protocol of interaction combines visual, audio, physical, and motor stimuli. The system is coded in Arduino, Pure Data, and Open Frameworks, and uses a low-budget hardware composed by video games head-mounted displays, first-person stereo cameras, Arduino, and servo engines. During
Sorry,
art
this video goes for a
residencies,
lot longer than I thought it
exhibitions,
did, sorry.
performances, and academic congresses of anthropology and embodied interaction, we developed several applications of the machine to be another, addressing issues like mutual respect, gender identity, generational conflicts, immigration and physical disability bias, body extension, and neurorehabilitation. More than an art installation, the Machine to Be Another is a Creative Commons initiative that can be replicated by anyone interested in understanding the world through the eyes of the other, and therefore interested in understanding themselves.
Was it worth it then?
The project has attracted the attention of the international press and also of researchers from different fields, from queer theory to psychology and conflict resolution. And we are planning to go much further in this long-term research that aims to raise the awareness that we are more than individuals. We are part of a big system, a big collective called humanity. And have you ever imagined how would this world be like if we could understand better?
I might just stop that because it's quite long, but I like how you guys laughed at the looking at your genitals thing, but let's be real, if we had the chance to be in someone else's body, that is totally what you would do. Sorry if there are any under 18 people in the audience. But what was really fascinating about this is all it took was a headset, so seeing a different point of vision, tricking your brain into thinking that what you are feeling yourself is exactly what the other person is feeling. So like, when you looked at the headset, that wasn't your body, but they were doing the exact same thing, but then you're also feeling exactly what they're doing. It's crazy, but that's actually all it takes to make you feel like you've been transported somewhere. All it takes is a couple of your senses to really make you feel like I'm no longer in this space right here. And it's super cool. So the way that the empathy machine works is that it can either force you into the perspective of another person, like you just saw. It can put you directly in front of someone and confront you with their emotion, like I was talking about previously. Or it could just shove you right in the middle of somewhere where you otherwise wouldn't be able to experience. Like, do you feel like you would be more inclined to donate to disaster relief funds if you literally stood in the middle of what happened, like in Puerto Rico when everything went down? Do you feel like you would give more money and be more giving that way? But when you see images on the screen and this kind of like 2D thing, you don't really feel anything, right? Like we've all seen those UNICEF ads. We don't really care because meh. And that's the empathy machine. If you can transport someone somewhere to live in the shoes of someone else for a day or for a few minutes, sometimes that's kind of all it takes to make you feel for another person. We can also apply this in so many different ways. We can apply this in training and in education. We're currently building this product where safety managers are working with heavy machinery every day, and they get really complacent that they're actually working around things that can kill them every single second of the day. And what we're doing is we're building this world where you can safely show people the consequences of being complacent. And hopefully that's something that will then jolt them back to being conscious that they need to take care, total care of their staff and themselves. Because it's just so easy when you're next to this giant thing that weighs about 30 tons every day. You don't think of it as a killer machine, but it's really scary. I've been next to those things. It's horrifying. So this goes back to considering, what perspective do you want to tell your story from? What are you trying to convey? How do you use this new tool of force perspective that brings different types of empathy to serve your purpose? Because to tell a really effective story, you need to generate genuine empathy. And there are a few ways you can do that. So let's be really, really deep for a second. I had a lot of fun putting these slides together, can you tell? How do you know what's real? That's a genuine question. How do you know you are in this room right now listening to me rant about stuff? How do you know this isn't part of a simulation and you're actually part of a really bad game of Sims? Okay, that's getting too deep right now. That was supposed to be somewhat rhetorical. We can debate. Who was that? We'll debate this afterwards over a drink, because I love solipsism as much as the next person. Yes, whoever said that over there, you can't touch me right now, but you can technically touch me if you came up here on the stage. You can touch the chair underneath you. You can smell alcohol, hopefully not me. You can hear me, you can see me, you can, all those 5 senses, that's how you know you're physically somewhere, right? The really cool thing about VR is that they can only manipulate 3 of those 5 senses. It's sight, it's sound, and it's touch. And as I showed you just then, that's kind of all it takes for you to feel like you're somewhere else. And that's a very dangerous tool to have. So I want to show you guys 2 examples, 2 of my favorite examples of effective VR. One, hopefully the volume's a bit down because there's going to be a lot of screaming. Has anyone played this before? It's fun, right? Oh yeah.
My palms are sweaty.
That is so cool.
I'll have to go back.
No, I don't want to.
Oh my god, oh my god.
This is legitimately how I reacted when I did this, by the way. So you don't necessarily need the plank to do that. Like when I played it for the first time, I literally make this stuff for a living, so I knew it was fake. And I didn't have the plank, and I was literally doing this. Because I was so scared that I would fall to nowhere. But isn't it interesting? All you needed, the graphics aren't even that amazing. They're like PS2 quality. They're not that amazing, right? But you've got this sight, you can feel this depth, you've got this sound, and you've got, for some of them, the wobbling board underneath them, and instantly they had this visceral reaction. They were there. Now here's another version, which is a bit less funny. It's called 1,000 Cuts.
Leave that boy alone.
Black is always the scariest.
He didn't do anything wrong.
Black fireball, Mike. Make
You can't leave here just like that.
It's us against them.
dangerous. I shouldn't have to tell you.
Sorry, didn't notice you there. Just brush it off.
You have now become Mike Sterling. Look at yourself in the mirror.
That was it. Short and sweet, right? The reason I showed that to you was because that also kind of can show what, even though it's got lower fidelity graphics, it's again more like PS1 level graphics for that. It uses those same three senses of touch, of sound, of visuals to then transport you into the body of another person. In this case, it takes you through several stages of this man's life. So he's African American and he experiences prejudices that some of us may never have experienced before. And at every stage, so you see him as a baby, you see him at 5 years, you see him at, I think, 15, and then you see him at 30 and then 50. But at the beginning of each stage, it starts with you sitting in front of a mirror. And when you're sitting in front of the mirror, you see him, not yourself. And you've got these controllers. And you move your arms, and that's his arms that are moving. And after a few minutes, you realize, oh shit, this is me. And everything that happens to him when he gets yelled at by his teacher for something that his classmate, his Caucasian classmate did that he's getting in trouble for, when he gets approached and attacked by police, when he's facing prejudices when looking for jobs, that feels like it's happening to you. And all that took was 3 points of sensory contact. All right, so how do you build your own empathy machine? You don't have full control. That's really scary. I'm a control freak. And the thing is, with, again, traditional flat formats, you can kind of filter down to a T exactly what you want that person to see, because it's all framed a certain way, it's all like colored a certain way, and you can do that to a degree, but at the end of the day, you can't control what Jim Bob is looking at. If there's this flashing crazy thing over here that you need him to be looking at, he could still decide to look over here, because screw what you care about. And you need to consider that when you're making something like this, because it's up to you to try to mitigate that as much as possible. There's always going to be one guy that just is going to ignore all social cues, but you just need to do your best to make sure that you're driving them to this shiny flashing thing over here without overtly having arrows saying, look here. Onboarding takes a lot longer than you think, or maybe you guys are aware that onboarding takes a really long time, but it took me way too long to understand that. Again, going back to the idea that VR is really isolating and confusing, and how when you put a headset on, you're not a human anymore. People can't even walk when they put a headset on for the first time. Like, if I literally got you guys to put a headset on and you saw exactly what you're seeing now, you'd still probably be doing that weird dance that I was doing before, where you're like this. And that's because it just doesn't feel right, because again, you're isolated and you just don't feel like you're in the real world. So onboarding, you really need to think about how onboarding works for the person, because a lot of the times you can't actually see what they're seeing if they're doing mobile VR. You're just kind of going, look to the left, I think. Look to the other left. I don't know. There's a red thing over there, I swear. You can't see what my hand is doing. Shh. And again, you have to consider that when you're creating the onboarding process of your product. And really try to integrate storytelling into the onboarding process as well, because it's already disorienting enough that they're in this place and you're probably staring at them. If you kind of ease them into it and give them time to kind of settle into the new environment and figure out where they are, and then let that time lead into onboarding that's tied in with story, then you've got yourself a really, really good experience for first timers. And that's kind of the people that we want to make experiences for, because it's kind of scary to me that probably over half of you guys haven't done VR before, but this is my lifeblood, and it's really scary to see that it still hasn't come into the mainstream, which I'm going to talk about in a second. You also want to have things react like they would in the real world. Like if I was to knock these things over, they would fall, right? How weird would it be if I did this and it literally phased through everything? Would you think I was Kitty Pryde or something? Like, wouldn't that be really weird? So you want to make sure that whatever the interactions that you build into it relate back to what the real world does as much as you can. Also, just a note, reading is really hard in VR, so if you decide to place text in when you're trying to do onboarding and stuff, be really conscious of your font choice, of where it's placed in the Z space and the size. So of the people that have done VR before, how many of you guys felt super vomity? Just you? Okay, more. There you go. Be honest. I've also felt really vomity doing VR before. Yeah. So does anyone know why that is? Was it really shaky? Was it like a roller coaster experience? What was it?
It was a shopping
You do VR and you go into shopping.
I went to, it was a test product. It was
Yeah.
a showcase, and I went along, and you were supposed to move your head around to try and select products.
Yeah.
I just felt like,
Uh-huh.
and that you couldn't actually land on anything.
Yeah.
Just like skating away. It was horrible.
Was it like was it a live action 360 film, or was it
No, it's just like a.
but they were moving you forward, right? Yeah. So the reason behind a lot of the reasons we get vomiting is because our brain doesn't really like the fact that they're seeing the world move around it and you're not physically moving, because that doesn't compute. If everything around me started moving right now, I would obviously hurl, because that does not make any sense to me. So why does that make sense in VR? Right? So when you're building locomotion in VR, which is moving around in space, you either allow them to just physically walk around, or you use teleportation, which is basically you click and you kind of make this arc and then you appear there. It's still a bit disorienting, but it's a lot better than people vomiting up in your headset. That's not nice. And last but not least, the most obvious thing, please test like crazy. Because what might be really good to one person might be really, really vomity or difficult for another. And the more you test, the better your product's gonna be. But I feel like I don't really have to tell you guys that. Why VR? Sorry, I just really love Simpsons. Does anyone know about that steamed hams scene? Yeah, so someone literally made that in VR. They had all the time in the world and they made it in VR. But the reason why I'm asking why VR is, if you're gonna make a VR product, you have to ask that question, because if you're making VR for VR's sake, you're part of the problem, not the solution. The reason why I was saying I'm scared that only half of you have done VR is because it's not fully in the mainstream yet. And I believe it's because of a few things, not just cost, but because a lot of your first experiences with VR are probably really shite. Because of the vomity thing, or because people are making VR for the sake of VR, they're not really thinking about why they're doing it. And if you think about that, because if you've got this concept where you could probably do it a million other ways that doesn't need to be in VR, you're doing it wrong. No offense. But if you've got this concept that makes total sense to be in this more than three-dimensional space that you can move around in, that you can look around in and have your user have complete control, then you're totally doing it right. Because I think it is your responsibility, if you decide to make virtual reality content, to make the best stuff that you possibly can. Because if you don't, you're perpetuating the problem. And if you decide to make the choice to come into the VR space, you're just making it worse for yourself. So, as the Incredibles are representing, it's your responsibility to take all of these things into account when you're making quality VR content, because that's the only way we can grow the industry. So the only takeaways that I've got for you guys is, make people feel good and feel stuff to tell good stories. And please, for the love of God, make VR that's good. That's it. And please applaud Julia